The layout of the presentation is, firstly, I would speak on the overview of the governance system. Overview of the governance system, then analysis of the financial allocation pattern at the state and size class levels, basically looking at the genuine allocations, and conclusions and a way forward. I have a few slides on the urban population and urban trends. Here we see that the columns, they represent the level of urbanization, which has steadily increased over the decades. The last one is 31%. The years are not very prominent, it's not visible at all. And the growth rates over the last 3 decades, it has gone down from 3.8% in 91 to 2.1%, 2.74 and 2.76. It has slightly picked up in the last decade, in the last decimal point. When we look at the percentage of urban population in different size categories, we find that we have a top-heavy urban structure. And if we consider the different countries, when we look at the percentage of population in cities with population over 5 million to total urban population, we find India is one of the most top-heavy with 23.5% of the urban population, which is in the 5 million plus category. And this is one of the reasons for this top heaviness. We have different urban structures in the country, and it makes urban governance a challenge because we have different structures at the different size class levels. I'm not talking much about this because Professor Sivaraman Krishnan has already covered this in his discussion. In the Indian cities, we have 377 million people in urban areas as of 2011, which is likely to increase to 600 million as per the high-powered expert committee report. And as of now, we have 52% GDP being produced in the urban areas, which is likely to increase to 75% in 2031. And 53 million plus cities is likely to increase to 87 in the next 2 decades. And level of urbanization, which is 31%, is likely to increase to about 50% in the next 4 decades. When we look at the changing perspective of governance and financing, we have seen that there has been dramatic changes in the policy perspectives of the central government, which has tried to create an institutional framework which can attract both public and private investment. And to this effect, the government had established the Urban Reform Incentive Fund, the City Challenge Fund, the pool financing mechanism in the past few decades. And we had also tried to tap the capital market through credit rating, and there was also escrowing of the buoyant sources of revenue in the bigger municipalities, the corporations, to tap the capital market. We had reforms in the municipal governance with regard to decentralization of funds, functions and functionaries, which was brought about by the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act in 1992. We tried to empower our urban local bodies. Planning responsibilities were tried to be transferred to the elected governments. The under 243Y of the 74th Amendment, the states had to constitute the state finance commissions every 5 years, and 18 functions were to be devolved under the 12th schedule, which included core functions, welfare functions and development functions. When we assess the present scenario, we find that elections were held in many states for the first time as a result of the JNNURM, which also had elections as one of the mandates. The 12 scheduled functions were transferred without improving the financial powers of the urban local bodies. The state finance commissions did not suggest significant improvement in the tax sharing among the states and the urban local bodies. Determination of tax rates and introduction of new taxes is still with the state governments, and there is a constant reluctance of the parastatals to surrender their authority over resources or functions. Yesterday I had a meeting with the Karnataka state with regard to the 74th, with regard to the JNNURM reform appraisal, where water is with the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, and it is not in a position to give away the responsibility, either the authority of resources or functions. but Bangalore, Karnataka did commit that it would pass on this service to the urban local bodies, and we do not know how we are going to manage this. The per capita own income of smaller urban local bodies is a quarter or a fifth of that of the million plus cities. The smaller urban local bodies are again highly dependent on straight transfers as a result of this, and because of the dearth of funds, the smaller urban local bodies are unable to carry out development and planning responsibilities, and establishment cost is much higher in these small towns, and many small towns including a few big municipal corporations, as for example Faridabad, at present is selling off its land to pay the salaries of staff in many of the ULBs. And on the other side, we have already embarked on a participatory urban governance. With the withdrawal of the state and the privatization of select basic services, we have aimed to improve our governance through decentralization, ensuring efficiency, accountability and cost recovery, and we also tried to improve our local governance through the ward committees. And because of the big size of the local bodies, in many of the cases the failure of the ward committees in meeting the aspirations of the people resulted in emergence of a parallel system of governance through the resident welfare organizations, and elite capture of local governance and marginalization of the poor is taking place. And involvement of the resident welfare associations in civic management is leading to marginalization of the poor and accentuation of intra-city disparities. Prior to the launch of the Jananivaram in 2005, we had several urban development programs, and in 2005 the mission was launched with the two pressing needs. One is massive investments required for infrastructural development, and at the same time reforms that are required to sustain the investments. In order to access the Jananivaram funds, the cities need to prepare DPRs which should be within the CDPs, and at the same time 23 reforms are to be complied, and if these two conditions are fulfilled, the additional central assistance is given to the various urban local bodies. I tried to work out the allocation of the 65 mission cities. When we consider the urban agglomeration, it works out to be 179 urban local bodies, and the remaining towns, the UIDSS-empty towns, where I found 80% of the funds in the last 7 years have gone to the mission cities, whereas 20% to the small towns. And out of this 80%, 60% for the urban infrastructure governance part and 40% for the urban poor. And the economic survey, the latest one 2013, shows that only 672 towns have been covered under the UIDSS-empty program. And again 80% of this funds has gone to the UIG and only 20% to IIHS-DP, which is for the urban poor. And also when I worked out the per capita allocation, taking only the cities where the funds have reached, I have found that it is 220 rupees for the mission cities and 119 rupees for the non-mission 672 cities, small towns included. And we were supposed to cover out of the 5161 cities, other than the 65 mission cities, the others were supposed to be taken up under the UIDSS-empty town programs, but because the small towns were not in a position to prepare DPRs and CDPs, they have been left out of this entire program. And the existing programs have been subsumed under the Jananivaram, and as of now, the 5161 minus 65 plus 672, which is more than 4,000, do not have any centrally sponsored urban development programs. Again, under Jananivaram, we have the 23 reforms which are to be complied by the state governments and the urban local bodies, reforms related to delegation of powers and responsibilities, for improving the operational efficiency of urban local bodies, for augmenting sources of funding, for bringing about transparency and accountability, with a focus on BSUP and IIHS-UC of course. Here we have internal earmarking of funds for the urban poor, earmarking of developed land for the poor and basic services to the urban poor. This is being administered by the HUPA, the Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation Ministry. There are also other reforms related to rent controls, reduction in stamp duty, enactment of community participation law and others. When we look at the present scenario, we find that both DPCs and MPCs have been formed, but they are yet to be functional. With regard to the community participation law, there are variants. Delhi did not have to pass this law because RWA, the Bhagidari system is already functioning there through RWAs. The same is the case with Kerala. Because Kerala has a strong RWA system, Kerala state government did not have to pass the community participation law. Property tax and user charge collection has improved in many cities, the 65 mission cities. Many cities have been unable to bring about efficiency in service delivery because of the absence of e-governance. Repeal of Alcra, which was supposed to help the poor, did not do so, rather it has helped the developers. States with an efficient Directorate of Municipal Administration has been more efficient in bringing about reforms, as for example in the state of Kerala we have the municipal reform cell, which has helped all the small towns, irrespective of whether they have received the UIDSMT funds or not, in bringing about reforms. Earmarking developed land for the poor is a difficult proposition for the developers, and that too to the extent of 20 to 25%. The developers are trying to contribute to the state shelter fund instead, and it is also difficult to cross check whether the internal earmarking of funds, which is to be at least 22%, is actually happening, as in many of the cities there are no separate budget heads for the poor, and citizens charter, which is again one of the pro-poor reforms, has not yet been formulated in most of the cities because the cities do not know what exactly it is about. This table shows that the 65 JNURM mission cities, they have been able, 53 have been able to shift to the double entry accounting system. Property tax coverage has improved in 40, property tax collection in 31, and internal earmarking of funds for services to urban poor, because this is very easy. This has been accomplished in 63 mission cities. When we look at the sector-wise distribution of funds released under JNURM, one finds that it is water supply and sewerage, which is about 80%, and the rest roads 23%, and urban renewal, which was the basic purpose of the mission, is only 1%. The big city bias is very evident. Here we find in case of Kolkata, it is 85% of the total state ACA which has gone to Kolkata alone, followed by Chennai, Bangalore, Greater Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Delhi, because it is a national capital territory, 100% has gone to the state and the city. When we look at the geographical coverage, we find the state level analysis that class 1 cities in the developed states, as for example 95% in West Bengal has received the funds. The class 2 cities have a larger percentage of population uncovered, which ranges from 93% in West Bengal to about 60% in Gujarat. The coverage of towns declines systematically in the size classes 3 to 6, which is less than 50,000 population, and the situation is worse in the less developed states. When we look at the interdependencies in the investment with the development indicators, we find there is a strong and positive correlation between the UIG and BSUP allocations. Do I have 5 minutes? 2 minutes, okay. I tried to bring out a few of the assessment on JNURM made by the CAG in last October 2012, where the CAG has brought out that out of the 2815 projects approved, only 253 has been completed as of now, which is 8.9% of the total projects. And in Delhi, there were no projects approved under the CDP, although under JNURM the DPR should fall within the overall CDP, but they were all for the Commonwealth Games, and after the Games they were all included under the JNURM. And Puri was taken as a JNURM city because of its heritage consideration, but there were no projects under heritage. And also there is a disconnect between DPR and beneficiary selection. One thing very surprising happened in Kochi. The basic services for urban poor dwelling units constructed under this were allotted to the corporation employees instead of the urban poor. And in many cases we find that there has been no beneficiary survey or identification done for the BSUP projects. So after the projects are complete, the dwelling units are provided to beneficiaries who are not eligible for that purpose. Exclusion of the poor is happening as ambiguity. There is ambiguity in the defining tenable and untenable slums, and this will also likely to happen for under RAY. The share of in situ upgradation has been very low for the GNURM. There has been no standardized criteria for beneficiary selection, and there has been diverse data source on urban slums. And the million+ cities which also have a higher coverage of basic amenities have received higher per capita allocation. There has been centralized pattern of disbursal of funds, although we are talking about decentralization, but the entire funds it's being allocated from the central ministry. There is a big city bias inbuilt in the program, and there is a project based approach. It is not the whole city approach, but it is only the DPRs which get sanctioned gets the funding. This has also resulted in increasing inter and intra-city disparities. Community participation has been limited in the CDP preparations. There has been inability to raise matching funds on the part of the state and ULBs in most of the backward states. There has been non-compliance with the reforms as a result of the result of this, and there has been inability to prepare DPRs, which has resulted small towns being left out. This disparity could be addressed by paying urgent attention to building capacities at the urban local body level with a focus on the small towns, and launching of a program similar to GNURM for the urban development of small and medium towns with a focus on the urban poor, because as of now we have 2532 new census towns which has come up in the 2011 census, and these do not fall under the municipal governance, as was rightly pointed out by Professor Srivaramakrishnan. They are all urban but not municipal. So we should do something to bring them under the urban governance. Thank you.